Hi everyone, welcome to 33 Founders. We're really excited to be with you today because we're here with the co-founders of HomeHero, Kyle Hill and Mike Townsend. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Glad to be here.
Can we start out with you telling us about the solution you're providing, because it's so drastically different than everything else on the market right now?
Yeah, so what we're building is it's a online marketplace to help families find in-home non-medical senior care. And as of right now, there's not really an effective way to find care online in a safe, reliable, and affordable manner. And so our vision is really to build the most recognizable brand in healthcare associated with in-home senior care.
Pando Daily actually describes other websites' features as basic compared to yours. When you guys were looking to disrupt this industry, it's a $40 billion industry, what did you know you had to do to be different?
Potentially more than 40 billion.
Yeah, that's on paper. It's not counting a lot of the offline transactions. I think the biggest thing is established trust. We saw, we spent a lot of time early on, Mike and I, just having a lot of conversations around, do we want it to be the fastest? Do we want to be the most affordable? Or do we want to have the highest quality? And what we're realizing, we obviously want all three, but if we had to just pick one, it'll be quality. It's the most important thing. You have to have the best caregivers that show up on time. They're reliable because you're leaving them with the people who matter most to you in your life. And so we just had to have the highest quality caregivers, and that's where we believe we really differentiate ourselves the most. Is the process in which we find those caregivers is unmatched.
So with so many of these service startups on the rise, can you give us a glimpse of what your hiring and screening process looks like?
Yeah, so when we first sought out how to bring on, we call them heroes internally, so they're caregivers before they start and then they're heroes afterwards. And we went to a lot of meetup groups. We basically discovered where do they go to look for jobs, especially those who are really highly qualified, the people that we want to represent. And a lot of them come out of schools. They'll go to a CNA schools, they'll go to CPR classes. They'll basically do something to prove that this is something that they want to do for the rest of their life, or at least take a first step in developing these skills. So we look for those kind of people, not the kind of people who were just laid off from a previous job. So that's some of the first questions that we have. But we have an online sort of filtering process that they go through. And then we talk to them a bit over the phone, and then we bring them in. We have these group-style orientation sessions where we basically use the kind of group together and just play off each other. We show them what HomeHero is, how we're different, the vision for us, and what we think a lot about in the supply side of bringing on new heroes is a sense of community. So we have our own internal tools and communication platform for the caregivers to talk to each other and learn from each other. We don't want to become the experts and provide them information, but rather let each one of them talk to each other. So that's a big part of finding them, onboarding them, and then really establishing that community so they can each succeed individually.
Yeah, and the quality control doesn't end at hiring. Once they're actually hired, you even have this two-strike policy. Do you have that same mentality for other parts of your work?
The two-strike policy, do we have it on other parts of the work? We do. I mean, a big part of it is trying to read people. I think at the end of the day, what makes companies like Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and any other marketplace successful is that you rely on the basic goodness of people, right? There's trust in each of these marketplaces, right? Like if I go to a new country and stay in a random person's home on Airbnb, Airbnb is relying on the fact that people naturally want to do good. So all you have to do as a company is screen those who don't, right? And if you can look for certain indicators, and there's, we've counted over 80 of them that we use to screen, is basically using those to determine who's not a good fit, right? Who's naturally not a good person or has the intrinsic desire out of the platform that we look for.
What are some of those surprising qualities?
Yeah, a lot of them are very simple, and then there's the very subtle ones we use in the product to determine. But a lot of them is response time, right? Previously occupations. Do they have references that clear? But then there's even subtle ones like what kind of technology do they use, right? Do they use like an iPhone or Android? Because if not, then they typically have a difficult time managing other clients, which probably doesn't mean they're a good fit. That and just the other, the desire to be something better in the future, right? To like develop your skills, to advance your career. This is an important job for millions of people. So the trends kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, and you guys have said that entrepreneurship is like an experiment. So how do you know when it's time to try something new or pivot?
I've always said like the only sign of life is growth. And I think if you're setting milestones and you're hitting or exceeding those milestones, then you should keep the pedal to the metal. But at our last startup, FlowTab, I mean, Mike and I, we hit a wall at one point where we just felt like we weren't growing. We were setting out goals for ourselves in terms of the number of bars and transactions and new users, and 3 months later, we were orders of magnitude away from hitting those goals. And so we really, I think, made a responsible decision to say, hey, let's do something different, right? And then we ended up pivoting into stadium ordering and some other things. So for us at HomeHero, we've just been able to continue to hit or exceed our goals, and that's exciting, and it shows that we have a pulse, and we still have a lot of growth left to do. So.
Great. One of your guys' angel investors is Jason Calcanis, and he's described you guys as the next Uber, which is not a bad compliment, especially because he's one of their investors. What are you learning working alongside him?
Well, I think Uber is a super unicorn, and I don't think anyone's going to be duplicating that anytime soon. I mean, we're certainly, I love the praise from Jason, and he certainly is a pretty exciting guy. What are we learning from him? I mean, I think that he's exposed to enough startups to where he knows and understands rollout strategies, and so we've certainly taken pages from companies like Uber of how to launch a city. Instead of going nationwide from day one, we said let's build a really small fire and really concentrate on the customers and clients that we have in Los Angeles. So we're really in no hurry to do multi-city expansion right now. We want to just dominate Los Angeles, really saturate this market, establish a lot of trust in the clients here, and then once we really understand this market and have developed a playbook for Los Angeles, then we can look at duplicating that in other markets. And so I think that he understands that, and he's been a big advocate of that strategy just from the get-go. So that was, I think we see eye to eye on that, and quite a bit.
Why do you think it's so important for disruptive startups to do that, to just focus on one niche market in the beginning?
Well, it's not obvious thing. I mean, our last company, we were in 3 different states, and I don't even think we had product market fit in one city. And so
yeah, I think it comes down to the sense of monopoly, right? Like monopolies inherently are good for capitalism and companies individually. They're kind of looked at from this negative sense on a macro level because of the government enforcement to regulate them. But I think if you can develop a monopoly on your own defined turf, right, like ours currently is going to be geographic and it's going to be based in Los Angeles. But if you can sort of own that, you have all the partners and all the distribution channels and all the customers, and you create this whirlwind effect here, you learn so much. And if you can duplicate that in other places, once you have it in one place, it's much, much easier to duplicate that. So I think companies, rather than looking at like the total market size, which frankly is intimidating, right, as to how you could ever get there, like look at it as a small market size that you could own, right, like the Facebook to Harvard effect. And I think you'll also make it more digestible mentally to get to that first sort of win, that first level, that first city, that first monopoly.
Right, and that was a lesson that we heard you discussing with Jason. And I know there were a bunch of other lessons. We read them on TechCrunch. Amazing article for anyone who hasn't read it yet. And I want to talk a little bit more about post-FlowTab, specifically product development. I mean, what was one of the first things that you knew you had to do differently?
It's like what we were just talking about. I mean, we had to. I use the analogy a lot. It's like throwing logs on a fire before you have a fire, and we knew that was one thing we had to do differently. We had to really understand our market and get product market fit in one place before we duplicated it. And I think that it's a natural tendency to try to grow to try to grow outward. Say, well, if we have X revenue in Los Angeles, we could probably duplicate it and do the same thing in San Diego, but we're not actually any closer to solving the real problems, and so we'd rather just go really, really deep in one concentrated area. So that was one, I think, mistake that we made. The other one was, I think we didn't spend enough time understanding our customer early on with FlowTab, and we were very quick to build a product and then put it in people's faces, as opposed to really try to understand what the problems of our clients were, and to make sure we actually were solving a real problem. So the first 6 months of the company, we frankly just spent talking to caregivers, talking to care seekers, and talking to geriatric care managers and hospitals and nursing facilities. So we spent a lot of time out of the office, just getting to know our industry a little better. And so that was certainly something we did differently this time around.
So now you guys are also working at Science Inc., which is an incubator in Los Angeles. What are you learning as you work alongside companies in the portfolio like Medium and Dog Vacay? How are you getting the most out of your experience there?
Yeah, I think it's proactive. I think you run into, like, my development of product is build it internally as best you can with your own research. But when you encompass like strong forks in the road, like decisions you need to make, kind of poke your head up and look how other companies do this. So like collecting references or onboarding people in person versus online, like those are major product decisions and company decisions that I think like can either make or break you. So we try to have our own conversations internally and do our own research. But having Dog Vacay to talk to, Aaron's awesome, and just discovering like, you can't go on Dog Vacay and just create a host profile, right? They have to talk to you. You have to have at least 5 pictures up. Like a lot of those are conscious decisions that they learned over time, probably by starting on the lower end of just allowing anyone to go up. So we think about the same thing, right? Even our evolution of the hero profile is evolved to be more stringent, really restricting people to, go through a more rigid process. So a lot of that is early conversations with Dog Vacay. Dog Vacay is, I mention them the most because they're a marketplace with kind of the 3 constituent model that we have, and you learn a lot of just subtle nuances and learnings across what comes off as a very simple product on the outside. So yeah, there's like the iceberg effect, right?
Do you ever communicate with them?
Yeah, they're right up the street. Yeah, we hang out with them.
There we go.
Yeah, it was great to just watch. I mean, I think frankly they had a lot more headwind than we did, just because they were kind of in uncharted territory, and they were in this. They were in the dog and pet industry, and so I just think it was a lot more unproven. For us, there's like no denying like the size of our market and the senior care. So, but when we approached it early on, we were able to look at them who were maybe 18 months ahead of us and really learn a lot. And we didn't have to reinvent the wheel in a lot of areas. So how are you getting your customers? What's your ad buying strategy? What is your onboarding strategy? And so we were able to just kind of accelerate our growth a little bit just by having that relationship with Aaron.
Great. So you guys just won a Webby. You've been compared to Uber, and one of your caregivers has actually been asked to move to Greece with the senior that she cares for. What do you want to happen in the next 12 months for the two of you to feel entirely successful?
Well, the last one gets me most excited because that's something I can actually hold on to, and it's real, and it relates the most to our business. And so more of those relationships. We're actually good friends with William Barnes. He's a general manager of Uber, and I remember asking him like, "How do you get most of your customers?" And he just looked at him. He goes, "I have no clue," and I was like shocked to hear him say that, but it was right, because he just said when you have a product that. When you have product market fit, people will talk about it, and there is no silver bullet. There's no hack on growth. I mean, if you deliver a good product to the market, people will use it. And I think that we don't have to be that creative in our marketing strategies. We just have to be very good at what we do, and then we have to just deliver a good experience to the people that use it, and we'll grow. Like it's pretty simple.
I don't think you could have put it any better. Can you tell us how people can get in touch with HomeHero and start using the service?
HomeHero.org would be a good start. Yeah, that's probably the best way to go. And then we've got our phone number on there. So,
or send us an email, Mike or Kyle at HomeHero.org. Very transparent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Definitely.
Awesome.